Caroline earned both her undergraduate and law degrees from Rutgers University and has lived in the Trenton area with her 2 children for over 20 years. Now I will turn it over to Ms. Clarke.
Thank you, Ms. Foreman. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're going to jump right in. Thank you for having me. We're going to have 6 to 7 questions for each candidate. We do have some extra questions. If you guys are super short with your answers, we may be able to get to them. But as of right now, I've allotted 6 to 7 questions per candidate. I will also ask multiple candidates the same questions. So I will name you at the onset of the question, just so that you are listening particularly keenly to ensure that you answer the question. Got it? Okay. So my first question is directed to all the candidates. What does achieving equity, inclusion, and accessibility for Black and Brown students mean to you? Please provide specific solutions and whether you believe equity, inclusion, and accessibility should be a priority, or whether you believe equity is harmful to white students. I'd like to start with Ms. Candidate Behrend.
Thank you so much. It's a great question. I'll just introduce myself quickly. I'm Beth Behrend. I am a member of the board, so I don't speak on behalf of the board this evening. I'm speaking for myself. On this question, I would say what equity means to me is that all students be provided with the opportunity to reach their potential and live lives of joy and purpose. And that assumes that we have high expectations for all of our kids. And I believe that it's really important that we acknowledge that there's structural racism in the air that we breathe, and we are a majority white society. And I also think it's really important for anyone on the board to understand our own history in this community, because it does impact how Black students feel and live in our schools. And understanding the 1948 Princeton plan and the impact and all those things are really important for us to always have at forefront when we think about how what we say and do impacts our community members. It is not a zero-sum game. In fact, we are disadvantaging the majority or the non-minority students by not having equitable education and educating them in a homogeneous environment, because the world is a diverse place and they need to know how to be and operate there well. So those are the things I want to say to that question. I'm not sure if I covered everything. I hope I did.
Do you have any specific solutions?
Specific solutions, I hope we can talk about those tonight, but there's a lot of things that we've been doing at the board level. We have very specific strategic plan goals that are based on data that focus on some of the gaps that we have and some of the needs that we have to do better on, including student wellness, including specific areas of achievement, pre-K through 3 education, early literacy, trying to get kids up to grade level by grade 3. We're doing a multi-tier system of supports in the classroom where we're able to meet the kids in an inclusive environment, pushing things in, pulling some things out, but providing to all children together some of the things that they all need. We have a number of different things that we're working on in terms of the high school. We are trying to increase interest in the APs among kids who may not consider that something that is their path. We want to make sure that our research program is open to the multi-language learners, because there's been some wonderful work done there by Dr. Joy Barnes-Johnson and Mr. Eastburn, making those teams more inclusive and bringing kids into the program who otherwise wouldn't have been in there. And they're learning everything about the scientific process and publishing and grant writing and all the great things that we offer in that 3-year program. You're going to have to stop me if I come to the end, because I don't have a camera or a timer in front of me. Have I exceeded my time?
You haven't exceeded your time because I didn't give you a time, but that was my mistake. So Veronica, would you keep time for us and let us know when 90 seconds is over? But thank you very much, Beth.
Thank you.
I will be keeping time, but go ahead.
Thank you. So would candidate Bierman would like to answer that question?
Well, it's a pretty loaded question with a lot of assumptions, so I don't know where you go exactly. Equity for all. It's a laudable goal. One thing that's not equitable, I don't think, and I think it's a ideology, a misguided ideology, would be detracking. I think that would level down for all students, but that's a whole nother conversation for another time. I know that's what they want. Some people want detracking. I think it's career suicide for anyone who wants to go to a tech school or college, especially if it doesn't allow you to get 2 years of calculus. With that said, I can only talk about my own experiences going to Princeton schools, and I teach too. I teach at a school for teen moms in Trenton, New Jersey. And what Miss Beth touched on, the multi-tier approach with a hierarchy, with a process, and I'll get to the specifics. When you have something like a process, we had a reading recovery plan. It was from Reading Horizons, and it was it would wrap 5 concepts around one idea, and you could only move in incremental phases. It was online, so the students could do it at their own pace, accompanied by a teacher. And one thing I did at the beginning, because I got data and I'd get a charismatic witness, I would say, look, if you do these things on this program, you will succeed. Your reading level will go up, your understanding will go up, you would discover whole new worlds, basically. And then the multi-tier approach was this. The superintendent of where I work at told the principals, I want this done, and then make sure the process is followed, how to teach Reading Horizons, and the teachers do it. And if they don't do it, if they don't work in sync with aides or translators, because we have Spanish speakers too and everything, there has to be some kind of consequence for that.
Stop.
And then, now, wait, I just started. Okay.
Thank you, Madam.
Maybe I can go on another time. Anyway, it was a great program. It's a success story, and students, if you want to play the color game, students of color and immigrants, their reading scores went up. They got to high school level within a couple months.
This is a serious discussion, and equity and inclusion is a serious issue.
I'm being serious, but I'm just saying, are we talking about only Black students? We're talking about all students.
I believe the question was about achieving equity, inclusion, and accessibility for Black and Brown students. What does that mean to you?
Well, I take that as and I tell you what I do. Find a program that works and make sure they do it.
Right. Okay, thank you. Next candidate Hubbard, would you answer that question for us, please? What does achieving equity, inclusion, and accessibility for Black and Brown students mean to you? Please provide specific solutions and whether you believe equity, inclusion, and accessibility should be a priority, or whether you believe it is harmful to white students.
Thank you. To me, educational equity means providing all our children with the support they need to reach their highest potential in our classrooms. It's important because that's what our schools are for. Our kids' futures depend on the educations they receive in our schools. The most obvious ways to promote equity are things that benefit all students. For example, making sure that our schools are using excellent curricula and that the quality of instruction is high, because great teachers benefit everybody. Having high quality curriculum and instruction is good for everyone, but it's especially important for disadvantaged kids who don't have as strong educational safety nets outside of school, right? Whose parents can't necessarily make up for weaknesses or gaps with tutoring or enrichments. And that's something that plays out a lot, I think, in our district. We also saw it play out in COVID, when the turn to remote and hybrid instruction meant that educational quality suffered for everybody, but the impacts were felt most painfully by the children with the fewest resources. So high quality education for everyone needs to be the goal. However, disadvantaged students are also going to need extra help to close achievement gaps, because if you want to close those gaps, you need to make sure that they learn faster than their advantaged peers, which means you need to put in more resources and more effort. High impact tutoring, focusing on literacy for the early grades and on math for the later grades is, according to research, the most effective means to achieve this. High impact tutoring costs a lot of money, and that's where the question of trade-offs comes in, because we have a limited amount of money to spend. My position is that getting students to proficiency is at the core of our district's mission, and that as a matter of resource allocation, core activities should be prioritized over non-core activities.
Thank you, Candidate Hubbard. Candidate Ponder, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, I'd appreciate it if you would. Thanks.
What does achieving equity, inclusion, and accessibility for Black and Brown students mean to you? Please provide specific solutions and whether you believe equity, inclusion, and accessibility should be a priority or is harmful to white students.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank PPBC and Not in Our Town for sponsoring this forum. I think it's a great opportunity to focus on the needs of Black and Brown students in our district. For me, equity is absolutely a priority. And while I join with the other candidates in talking about curriculum and access to APs and test scores, one of the major challenges that we've had in this school district for decades has been the feeling that Black students do not belong. Before you can bring a student into a classroom, before you can start to educate them, they have to feel valued, they have to feel like they belong, they have to feel like they're part of the school community. Unfortunately, in some of our elementary schools, as well as our middle school and our high school, our students, Black and Brown students, feel alienated, they feel isolated, and they feel that their challenges are not addressed. There is an undertone in this discussion around low income or tutoring or more help. And for some students, that may, Black and Brown students, that may certainly be the case. But for other students, it really is a question of the quality of instruction, the intentionality around engaging those students within the entire school environment, and also engaging parents in a respectful way when those parents, Black and Brown parents or parents of those Black and Brown kids, come to the schools for whether it's a problem or any other kind of challenge. And I think I see stop.
Thank you, Candidate. I think we've gone through all 5 of our candidates.
No,
No.
Renee.
Rene,
Obergon.
I apologize. Okay, Candidate Rene, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I've heard the question. Thank you very much. So from my perspective, I think equity for me means equitable opportunities for all. So I don't believe that there's such a thing as equitable outcomes for all. And I use the example, and everyone has kids. You give your 2 kids everything the same as I do my kids, and they don't come out the same. So I don't think that's a realistic goal. However, I 100% believe that we need to provide equitable opportunities for all. I think when I think of equity, and why certain groups are underperforming or underrepresented, I want to understand why they're underrepresented and how we can improve the representation. I agree with some of the commentary that people have made. I think some of the issues are, it can be as simple as providing mentoring people who look like you, who sound like you, who have lived your experience. Are we doing enough tutoring? So Eleanor mentioned tutoring. 100% believe that tutoring is very important. Having group events so that people experience things that they haven't experienced in their life, right? So, going with someone who's exposing you to new experiences where you're doing things with other groups of people that are also not you will bring the broader community together. You mentioned specific examples. I'll give you a real world example for me. For the last 5 years, I've run a paid internship for 3 high school juniors for 2 weeks at my firm, right? So I do it, they sit with me. My quick background here is I'm first generation American. I was one of these kids. The funny thing is I have done a very good job, but actually I have no girls in the internships. I've had no Black or Brown in the internships or no underprivileged kids in the internships. Not on purpose, but it's not the universe. I have 2 boys and it was people that I knew, right? I want to help these kids have a high school internship. It's fantastic. They learn, they work, they're learning how to work in the community. How do we work with, how does the school reach out to me and connect me with students to say, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who would like to give this type of opportunity to students. So that's a concrete example. And I don't think, it would disenfranchise white people equity. That's equity is good for everyone.
Thank you for answering that question. We're on to question number 2. This question is for candidates Behrend, Tuck-Ponder. Behrend and Tuck-Ponder. Your opponents have claimed the board lacks transparency and competence. Since the end of the pandemic, has the board and district leadership had any successes or done anything to establish a foundation for future success?
Well, where would you like me to start? We got through the pandemic. We came back to remote learning. We transitioned to one-to-one devices, which allowed all of our children access to technology and learning. We provided food support to over 500 families during the pandemic. We came out of the pandemic. We had a new superintendent. We did a strategic plan, which now has 4 measurable goals, which I'm very excited about based on data. We have brought in clinical supports for our students when we see needs for them in terms of mental health. That's something that was a rising need, or was certainly post-pandemic. We have done a phenomenal approach to early childhood literacy. We went from 0 to 9 pre-K classes in this community. We have pre-K disabled, 3-year-old. We have them in the locations where people live in their community. That has done an amazing amount to bring readiness to our younger students. And we have this goal of assuring everyone's at reading level by 3rd grade, because if they don't come up by early years, they're not going to be able to enjoy the banquet that we provide for them later. And we all know that we have kind of a 2-tier system. You go into the high school, there's a group of kids on the 2nd floor and there's a group of kids on the 1st floor, and they don't necessarily mix. And we want to make sure we catch our kids early and we get them up to speed and able to enjoy what we offer them. So we also brought in Orton Gillingham training. We are now one of 12 districts in the country that are certified to train that. We train our own. We've done all of our K teachers, our 1st grade teachers, and we train people from out of district. And that is a way of providing differentiated instruction to all students to make sure they're getting their reading down with all the different skills they need. We also have a new early bird screening for dyslexia, trying to catch the kids again early so that we don't miss that. And I'll say in my personal experience, there's been many families that I've known, and my own 2nd child who had learning differences. There was a real issue there trying to get him the attention and services that he needed. So we've done a big push in the early childhood years. We have a new supervisor of elementary school. So I could go on. There's quite a few things, and I won't even talk about budget and buildings. We can talk about that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Tuck-Ponder.
Okay, ditto what Ms. Behrend listed as accomplishments. And I'm going to start by saying it's really easy to sit on the outside and say that we're not transparent and that the board lacks trust or whatever the criticisms are. And I'll accept the criticisms because we are far, far from being perfect. But again, being on the Board of Education, especially during the pandemic, was sort of like changing the tires on the car while it's running down the highway. We had to really shift into gear. And one of the things I'm really proud of is our ability to get computers into the hands of every single student so that they could go to school remotely. Was going to school remotely ideal? No. Were we perfect at it? No. Our special ed kids in particular had a very challenging time during the pandemic. But I think that across the state, we were innovative, we were creative, and we were aggressive about continuing to educate our kids. We've done a special education review. We are in the process of doing a review of our math curriculum. We, as Beth mentioned, we've expanded preschool classes. We've had to manage our facilities issues, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And we've also had to consider or start to plan and put together a referendum going forward. And I won't mention all the work that happens at the committee level around policy and around student achievement. The work is really endless and ongoing. And many of these meetings are public. Our Board of Education meetings are public, and we invite and encourage the public to attend our meetings and let us hear what you're thinking. But the accusation that, we haven't been effective and that we have not delivered is really, I think, misguided.
Thank you, Candidate Tuck-Ponder. My third question is for candidates Bierman and Hubbard. My question is, you and other candidates have described the district's management of former principal Frank Schimmel as a power struggle or personality clash, as opposed to an employer-employee relationship. What is your proof that the relationship was a power struggle, and what does that mean? In your explanation, please tell us whether your opinion about the dismissal was the same before and after the release of the superintendent's 21-page statement of reasons. I'll start with you, candidate Bierman.
Oh, hi. Thank you. And first, I want to say, yes, the incumbents, I always hate it when people try to demonize. They have done good work, and they've done early education, Orton, Gillingham, and everything. But I think there is a profound lack of trust for many reasons. And I'll start with the principal. My opinion is the same as it was before and after, through my own internal investigation, from going to the Donaldson hearing, through looking through, whatever you want to call them, the transcripts. It wasn't a court case. And I think this is the MO of the superintendent. She comes in, she wants her own people, she wants them out. To me, it seems she weaponized, weaponized the reports, and she didn't do it in exactly the right way, which can now, she didn't do timely reports, she didn't use the proper documents. So now we're going to face probably even more legal problems and money that we're going to have to pay out. And yeah, I think it was a complete unforced error. As in terms of leadership, it was an awful decision. First of all, I think he should have stayed. I think he's an inspirational leader. I don't know how much time I have. Second of all, the outrage was predictable, and it led to divisiveness, loss of continuity in leadership, again, litigation, which is going to continue, money, and a lot of lack of trust, And if you went to that Donaldson hearing, it seemed the other board members basically had their minds made up before they already had their written statements saying why they weren't going to renew him, except Jean Durbin changed her mind for whatever reason. A huge unforced error. I mean, thank you.
Thank you, candidate Bierman. Candidate Hubbard, would you answer the question for me? Would you describe the district? I understand you described the district's management of former principal Frank, and I understand I mispronounced his name. My apologies for that. It's Schimmel, as a power struggle or a personality clash, as opposed to an employer-employee relationship. What is your proof that the relationship was a power struggle, and what does that mean? In your explanation, tell us whether your opinion about the dismissal was the same before and after the release of the superintendent's 21-page statement of reasons.
Thank you. I don't think I said it wasn't an employer-employee relationship, because clearly it was. But my impression was at the time that the timing of Mr. Schmil's dismissal had to do with the fact that he reneged on a private agreement that had been made within the district, having to do with his voluntarily going on leave in exchange for a good recommendation letter. This is all kind of more or less hearsay, and I'm sure there's stuff that I don't know, even after having listened to the Donaldson hearing. But my impression from hearing that is that there were internal power politics at work with the timing. That said, I'm not particularly a Schmil candidate here. I'm not a high school parent. I don't know Mr. Schmil personally. I did not sign the petition calling for his reinstatement and the resignation of Dr. Kelly, and my decision to run for the board was not motivated by that episode. And in my campaign, I have had a tense relationship with the group PS Advocates that you may know, that is sort of anti-Kelly, anti-board. They've tried very hard to persuade me to run on a slate. And after I told them I wasn't going to do that, they have persisted in acting as though I was doing it. So we've had a contentious email exchange about their decision to put up signs that say "Time for a New Era." You may have seen those around town. You should know that those signs were put up without my consent. My advocacy in the district has centered on the middle school math curriculum. I got involved a couple of years ago when it looked like the previous math supervisor and a consultant named Eric Milu were trying to push California math framework style
Candidate
reforms.
Hubbard, your time expired.
Okay,
I
sorry.
apologize. Thank you. The next question is for candidate Tuck Ponder. You have been accused of supporting Dr. Carol Kelly over Frank Schimmel because you and her are Black women and your racial similarity leads you to have a total disregard for the facts. Is this true, candidate Tuck Ponder?
I wonder if a white candidate would be asked that question if there was a white superintendent who was involved in controversy. I have been an elected official in this town for well over 20 years. And I think that anyone who accuses me of favoring someone because of race, that's an insult to my integrity, and they clearly don't know who I am. I will say, as a Black woman in leadership in this town, I understand the challenges that Dr. Kelly has experienced in her position. I understand that many people have, from my perspective, and it's not even my perspective, anybody that was at the listened to the Donaldson hearing, heard her called a liar, heard her reputation damaged, and just really have conducted themselves on this issue and other issues in a very disrespectful and demeaning way. And some of that I can't help but think is because they think they can do that because she's a Black woman. And I am sympathetic to that, and I understand it, and I think I see it when a lot of times my colleagues don't. But I judge people on their performance, and no, not on their color. So I reject that wholeheartedly. I'm done.
Thank you, candidate Tuck Ponder. Thank you for that. The next question is asked of candidates Obergon, Hubbard, and Bierman. What was your position, that is, were you an organizer or a protester, and your involvement regarding the controversy over the removal of Frank Schimmel and his decision to publicly challenge the decision? How has that episode impacted the way you would govern as a board member? I will start with candidate Obergon.
So sorry, the question is just what was my, can you repeat that just so?
Yes. What was your position and your involvement regarding the controversy over the removal of Principal Schimmel and his decision to publicly challenge the decision? And how has that episode impacted the way you would govern as a board member?
Right. So for me, I guess my view or my position and how I handled myself with the Schimmel situation was I attended the meetings just because obviously there was a lot of uproar with what happened. My position was always there was no transparency. Now I understand that there is limited transparency because this is a personnel issue. But that was really how I came out. I was never 100% in support of Schimmel. Again, I recognize that he was a very good principal. For me, ultimately, it was a question of transparency between the decision and the broader community. So that's what I think most people were looking for, transparency. When we got the Donaldson hearing, again, I recognize what we saw were limited in what we can see. But again, for me, hearing both sides of that, it very much felt like there was required further review. So again, I wouldn't sit there and say I came out with a decision, but it certainly required further review. So that's really kind of it. For me, the biggest issue was transparency and the way it was handled with the community, not letting the school finish the year end. I just thought was, again, I think just bad execution.
Thank you. Candidate Hubbard, I realize that you've already addressed some of this, but I'd like to give you an opportunity if you'd like to add to your previous response or your previous comments that address this issue.
Okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm not a high school parent. So my involvement in that controversy was really limited to being an interested observer. As I said before, my sort of advocacy in the district has centered around the middle school math curriculum. I got involved a couple of years ago when it looked like there was going to be an attempt to push the California math framework style reforms here. Those reforms have been controversial because they favor dead-end, low-quality math tracks that falsely give students the impression that they're being prepared for cutting-edge careers in data science. And if you're a cynic, it won't surprise you to hear that the architect of those reforms, not coincidentally, has an expensive data science curriculum that she wants to sell to districts. So I'm grateful to Dr. Kelly and to the board for nipping that particular initiative in the bud. I think as soon as it became public, they squelched it, and that was a good thing that they did. More recently, so last spring when the Schmiel stuff was going on, I advocated against a placement test for algebra that included content that was never taught in class. I believe firmly that in our district, access to advanced courses should not depend on private instruction, and I'm running first and foremost to improve our school's educational quality.
Okay. Can you tell me how that episode impacted the way you would govern as a board member?
For sure. It would make me very careful about hiring.
Thank you.
I think that's really the most important takeaway.
Thank you. And Candidate Bierman?
So again, I just felt it was handled so poorly. I think it was a power play. It was a lack of leadership. He didn't have tenure, so he had to go. If she wanted him to go, you could have given him a gold-plated send-off, the best recommendation. Tell other schools like, hey, it's not the right fit. I have a different way I want to govern, but let him go. I think with how she handled it, from my own private investigation, you could do the he said, she said forever. Yeah, she pushed him out horribly. It was unethical. It was wrong. How I would govern, look, I care about the whole school holistically. I work with who's ever there now and do what's best for the school. And that's just how it works. Celia Burge is there. I wish her the best. I hope for the best. I think Carol Kelly has made a lot of mistakes. I think Carol Kelly has brought in initiatives that are, I mean, she had a plan, but I think are really misguided. And I don't think she's transparent. But I still hope that lessons are learned that she can change. And I got to bring this up too. There was a letter. Remember when this was going on in May? And I think Mr. Ponder was there, and Shirley Satterfeld, when they said something that strikes me as xenophobic and very unhelpful. Was talking about Kelly being attacked, and here's one brief paragraph. Undoubtedly, the attacks, apparently led largely by non-residents and recent arrivals to Princeton, will continue. And then they go on, their ultimate objective is to get rid of Kelly. Imagine I said that. That sounds like a dog whistle to me. That sounds xenophobic. It sounds elitist, and it's unfortunate.
Okay. Thank you, Candidate Bierman. The next question is directed to Candidate Tuck Ponder. It has been suggested that board members are trying to lower our standards by getting rid of advanced placement and accelerated courses. Are you trying to reduce the number of advanced placements classes? If so, why?
Actually, I've been very public about my feeling that we have an excessive number of advanced placement courses. And it's not that I am opposed to advanced placement courses. My children took advanced placement courses. My daughter, who's a 2017 graduate of Princeton High School, and my son, who's currently a junior, they took multiple AP courses. The challenge is when you have limited space, limited funds, and limited teachers, are we making sure that we have sufficient academic opportunities for children or students who do not want to take AP courses, more gen ed courses that offer diversity and experiences and exposure in areas that are not designed to end up in a test and give college credit when, quite frankly, everybody doesn't want to go to college. So it's really about equity across resources. How many resources do we have? How many teachers do we have? How many classrooms do we have? And can we spread the wealth? Can we level the playing field so that all of our students get an opportunity to have a variety of educational experiences in our schools? And further, I'm concerned about the number of APs that we have. One, how many students do we have taking those classes? And secondly, we talk a lot about mental health and we talk a lot about stress, but we still want to push this AP agenda. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, students, we want you to take all these APs and allow students to take 5 APs and then say, oh my goodness, our kids have stress, our kids have emotional challenges. I mean, you can't have it both ways. So that's my position.
Thank you. My next question is for candidates Obergon and Bierman. Recently, we have seen lawn signs promoting Obergon, Hubbard, and Bierman. Candidate Hubbard has already put out her disclaimer that they were unauthorized. So my question is directed to candidates Oberman and Bierman. Is this a package deal or a slate? And assuming this is your endorsement of the other candidate, tell us why voters should vote for the other one. I'll start with you, candidate Obergon.
Yeah, so again, to be clear, and I think, well, I will speak for myself. I'm running and have always run as an independent candidate by myself. So I'm not making judgment for anyone else. I've always run for myself. And that's, I think I ask people to vote for me. I'm not asking them to vote for anyone else. I'm asking them to vote for me.
So did you authorize being put on the lawn sign with the other 2 candidates?
So the PSA Advocates operates independently by themselves, right? So they have their own board who does things on their own.
Okay, so you did or did not authorize that?
So they as their own independent body, they take their own decisions to put who they want to put on a sign.
I see. Okay, so I guess my question then is, did you raise any objections to it?
Well, I said I said originally that I would not want to run on a slate, and that was always my position. But again, if they want to support a slate of people, that is their right to support a slate of people. And again, we live in a democracy, so they're allowed to do that.
Okay, so the second part is, do you endorse the other 2 candidates?
So again, I'm running for myself. So I just, I will endorse myself. I'm not endorsing anyone but myself.
Thank you. Okay, candidate Bierman, same question.
Oh, first I want to say that I think Michele Ponda hit it on the head about that push-pull about mental health. Again, we don't have a lot of time with the nature of these forums to go into AP classes, but yeah, I mean, that's these parents, it's a brainiac. There's a strong lobby for AP classes. At the same time, they always talk about mental health and they care, but you have to justify expectations and not be contradictory in your actions. It's pretty difficult. Those kids are difficult. Going back to this. Well, yeah, I mean, again, Beth and Michele, they have strong, I talked to Michele, they have strong points. They should be congratulated, but I think this is time for a change. Yes, I think this is time for a new voice. I'm not working closely or in alliance with the 2 other candidates, but I do support them. I really think that there would be great additions. And when a PS Advocate said they wanted to use mine, I said, yes. When you run for office, branding is important to get your name out there as much as possible. So hell yes, I said yes. And I don't have to spend any money.
Okay, so tell me why you would vote for the other 2 candidates.
Oh, I think that fresh perspective. I think we definitely need a strong, independent financial background on the board. And I think Rene offers that from what I've heard. And then Eleanor is a scholar. Her research on math, if you read, I read her whole 16, 17 page math dissertation on math and how things should work and what was wrong with facts and figures. It just wasn't talking out of the blue. Quite impressive. And I think we do need a new voice. I think, unfortunately, people can get complacent when they're in power too long. I think they can get myopic, my opinion. And again, I'm never going to look. They have, like Marvel Comics, they have their superpowers, and they should never be. And I tell people when they say negative things sometimes about the incumbents, I go, look, don't go there. These people have talents, and they've given their time, they've given their expertise and their blood, sweat, and tears a lot. COVID was hell for everyone. It wasn't riding a plane without knowing how to ride it. It's also fixing the engine at the same time. They've done a lot.
Okay, thank you, candidate Bierman. My next question is for candidates Hubbard, Obergon, Behrend, and Bierman. Princeton Public School has significant overcrowding in Johnson Park and Littlebrook schools. Community Park is significantly underutilized to accommodate parents advocating for the dual language immersion program. Currently, the population around Community Park is bussed out of their community to the overcrowded schools, including new arrivals to the developments in the area. Do you support the proposal to reduce overcrowding and place more general ed students at Community Park? Do you support the plan to ask taxpayers for more money to expand or create facilities before fully utilizing the facilities that are already available? So I would like to start with candidate Hubbard.
Thank you. CP is underutilized because it houses the DLI program, and because the district realized that having a single traditional classroom per grade was not fair to the students in those classes, because there's no leeway for addressing interpersonal problems, imbalanced sex ratios, etc. I'm in favor of non-DLI kids in the CP area being able to go to their neighborhood school. I think it's ridiculous that they can't go. And I support the proposal to address overcrowding at Littlebrook and Johnson Park by building onto CP to accommodate a dual track school. It's not a perfect solution, but I agree that it looks like the best one that we can afford. As to the second part of this question, which is, do you support the plan to ask taxpayers for more money to build new facilities before fully utilizing the facilities available? I have to say, yes, I do. Because A, demographic growth is coming. We are going to need new space. And B, to fully utilize the facilities available immediately, we would have to scrap the DLI program right away and move students back to their zone schools, from Littlebrook and Johnson Park to CP, and from CP to the other schools. The district started the DLI program and cannot really unilaterally scrap it now when families are invested, and the students in question are young children who have already had a highly disrupted education because of the pandemic. Last year was the first normal school year in their memory. So kids are not objects that the district can move around at will to achieve its ends, and the district has to plan carefully to minimize disruptions.
Thank you, candidate Hubbard. Candidate Obergon?
Yes, so a couple of things. I think it's interesting. My kids went to JP, and the original vision of JP, when they were busing students at the time, primarily from Community Park, was actually to provide a more diverse student body for the students at JP, which was, I think, laudable, right? Like, I wanted my kids to go to a diverse school, which probably wouldn't have been the case if it was just the neighborhood school. At the same time, I totally recognize and appreciate wanting to walk to your schools, right? So at that point, you had two conflicting things, both of them good. But obviously, that was way back then. The situation now is quite different because we have overcrowding at CP because of the DLI, at JP and Littlebrook because of the DLI program at CP. High level, I'm in support of the DLI program. My understanding is that part of the issue is that they just don't have sufficient enrollment in the school. Part of that was just, if you talk to some of the parents, they feel that I guess the administration wasn't really pushing it enough. But it feels like that's slowly improving. But at the end of the day, we do, as Eleanor rightly stated, and I think all the candidates recognize, we do have an overcrowding problem coming our way soon. So I would be in support of kind of expanding the CP, so you're fitting in general education plus DLI. So again, high level support DLI. We want to get the schools back to capacity. Again, you know, we have this conflict where we want diversity, right? But sometimes diversity requires moving people around, and that was the original version of JP. So thank you.
Thank you, candidate Obergon. The next candidate is Behrend.
Thanks. This is a great question. One of my favorites. As Michele will know, I'm the co-chair of the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee. I've been working on this for 6 years. It's why I joined the board, was try to help unwind this knot that we have in the community. Change brings opportunity, right? We've been working, you know, we have a fundamental obligation to provide appropriate learning spaces for all of our children. We need to think through the needs of the entire district. And, you know, one nice to have program, which we do like and support, and a high performing district often have them. One nice to have program does not drive planning for the larger district. And our elementary schools are assets of this community that we've invested in and we own, and we need to use them to their ultimate capacity. No, not ultimate. I want to be clear. We need to use them most effectively until we add new space. And we want to make sure we do it at the right pace so that we're flexible, because enrollments is an art and it goes up and down. And as we saw from the pandemic, we had a big hit when we thought our hair was on fire in 2017. We got a little extra year, but we're growing and we're going up. And so we need a smart solution to how to welcome those new kids and make sure we have the right spaces. So I'll just say, I encourage your listeners to go to the presentation on the webpage of the district under the board and then future planning. We made a recommendation last week about this solution where we would like to bring back at least 2 traditional track sections at Community Park School, because it's the center of our community where the growth is coming. It's centrally located there. We did a matrix with 6 different considerations that we're trying to think about: capital cost, operating cost, impact on learning, walkability, and all these other things. We put it all in a big matrix, very complicated, but we want people to see, because we're trying to be transparent, how we're coming to these solutions. And tomorrow night we'll be talking about it again at our board meeting. So thank you for the question. It's very important. I think we can solve this problem, and we're going to do it in a great way that's going to reorganize and make sure kids are going to their local schools where they can. And right now they're not. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Behrend. Candidate Bierman.
First, I want to say, I don't always say the board is transparent. I think sometimes they do a very poor job, but here they're working very hard. They're in a rock and a hard place, and everything's interconnected. This started with fair share housing and our Princeton Council, and we can go into the internal politics of that, but you could say maybe Princeton got spanked. We're going to probably have 888 units of housing by 2027, depending what you read. I'll read some other reports, JPSG or something, and said maybe up to 1,000. But at the same time, we have to see how the demographics shake out. Hope for the best and plan for the worst. Demographics, it's a dismal science. It's been way off. I did my own investigation. In 2020, they were off by 125 students, which they thought would come. 2022, they're off by 434. 2023, off by 779. Again, so, and also sometimes demographics are done to rubber stamp what someone wants. They have internal agendas. You always have politics. But my answer to this is this. Yes, they're going to probably, if it does work out that they're going to be overcrowding, they're going to have to do what is best for everyone. Is Beth Behrend, I think she said it better than I could. With that matrix, it makes the best possible decision. Parents want the best for their kids. They want walkability. They're not going to be able to have it all. To accommodate everyone, you have to make compromises.
Okay. Thank you, candidate Bierman. Candidate Behrend, the next question is for you. During the debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters, your colleague, Michele Talk-Ponder, expressed her anger that the entire district, especially the Board of Ed, treats similar situated Black and Brown disciplinary infractions differently than they treat white students. We are aware that last year, white students fighting in bathrooms and vaping on school grounds did not receive the same punishment as Black and Latino kids doing the same thing. Do you deny the problem, that the board is a part of the problem when it comes to disproportionate discipline? Does your previous 6 years on the board, you have indicated, during your previous 6 years on the board, you've indicated that you support restorative justice. What have you done to reduce this disparity? And what will you do in the next 3 years? Candidate Behrend.
So I am on the board, I sit on the board, and it's not appropriate for me to comment on specific situations, in particular involving students. I will say that during my 6 years on the board, in every closed session, we receive a list of the suspensions and the HIBs, and we have demographics, and we talk about it, and we ask questions, and we want to understand. And I have to say that in the last couple of years with Superintendent Kelly, we have asked these questions very clearly, and we have gotten good information back. Are things always perfect? No. Are there issues? Yes. But I'm not going to say that I do think we've actually been trying to address this. I think it's really important that we ensure that the board policies are followed. It's important that we see the data, we understand it. I think it goes back to a higher level where there's always going to be, there has been implicit bias, there has been structural racism in our systems. These things are happening, they're real. We need to acknowledge them when they do happen and try to figure out how to work past it. I don't have a simple answer to this because this is something that's been going on for decades, but I don't know that I necessarily always agree with what my colleague said the other evening, because I don't want to comment on specific situations, but in my view, I don't see that there's an egregious problem on the board with this regard. And I know that my colleagues have the same view I do, that we're trying to make sure this doesn't happen. But where it does, there needs to be an investigation. There needs to be work with our staff. We need to acknowledge it and do something and put resources on it so it doesn't continue.
Thank you, Candidate Behrend. Candidate Bierman, this next question is for you. How can
Go on. I'm joking. Levity is good. You have to have a sense of humor and perspective. So it's cool.
Okay. So how can we better assure that discipline of each student is fair and individualized regardless of race? And how can we ensure that the discipline is perceived by the students as fair?
My God, how am I supposed to get into everyone's head and what they're doing? I don't have all the information. I have speculation. I can muse, but I don't have facts. I just heard 2 board members have somewhat dynamic, divergent points on discipline. The last forum, Michele Ponder said that a Black student would do something like bring in something classified as a weapon, say something sharp, and get nailed to the wall. And then like a couple of days later, a white student would do the same exact thing and doesn't get the same punishment. If that's true, that's a huge problem. Now I just heard from Beth that, no, it's not as egregious. So I don't even know what to tell you. I have my thoughts, but that's just musing. I mean, I don't know what else to say on that, really. And what people think and how they perceive things doesn't mean they're right. I've dealt with 16-year-olds in my whole life. I mean, their perception sometimes could be a little flawed or biased, or they could be right on tune. I don't know. I mean, I can only tell you what I went through when I went to Princeton High School, and when my parents told me. I can tell you their take on it. Do you want that?
Well, you have time.
Well, my mom said this, that a lot of times, one thing she saw that was definitely biased is that the behavioral issues for some of the Black kids, just more aggressive, that's all. They weren't bad kids. And some of these teachers just couldn't handle it. And it was easier to try to get them out than deal with it. And that's what it takes someone. It's hard though. My mom was really good at this though. She dealt with the whole person. She dealt with their emotional growth. She told me something, and I've learned from her and others. You listen, you accept what they have to say, you focus, you encourage, you offer them, and then you make a contract, how we can change your behavior. And to do that first, you have to be a solid object. You have to be legitimate in their eyes.
Thank you, Candidate Bierman. Thank you for that response. The next question is for Candidate Obergon. What is your record of community involvement and volunteer work with the schools? Specifically, what Board of Ed committees have you attended or participated in the past year? And if you haven't participated in any committee, why not?
So you mean attend and listen to committee meetings?
Yes.
Presumably, yes. Okay. So I would say at the board level meetings, I guess I really became more involved. Actually, COVID. I probably listened to more board meetings during COVID than any point, because I felt that we were not opening the schools fast enough. And I'm not talking right in the beginning. I'm talking when it was very clear that it was being very detrimental to the education of our students, and that's been proven fact. And then since then, I've been, I don't want to say all the board meetings, but I've been regularly in them. And then the committee meetings, I've been more recently, attending a couple meetings. I will say there've been a couple, and I'm not the only one, where I've tried to attend and they've been canceled or they've been closed when they're not supposed to be closed. And again, I think that's more just kind of bad execution. They weren't open, they weren't communicated. So that's been my involvement, I think, if that's the extent of the question.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is directed to, thank you, candidate Obergon. The next question is directed to candidate Talk-Ponder and candidate Behrend. Is the district office presently under a mandate to reduce a deficit? Will the board make any decisions in the near future that will make it impossible to reduce the deficit, such as hiring new math teachers, shrinking class sizes, increases in the number of buses? Explain how you propose to handle these budget issues, please. We'll start with candidate Talk-Ponder.
Sure. Our school district at the present time is operating with a structural deficit, which basically means that we are spending more than we have because of our personnel and kind of our fixed expenses. And so one of the ways that you address a structural deficit is you cut spending. And so the way budgets work is our chief executive and our top administrators develop a budget, most of which is, quite frankly, personnel costs. And then there are other costs that go along with operating the schools that have to be paid for. And then they present it in a comprehensive budget. And then we talk about what kind of tax impact that's going to have for the residents of the town. What you're talking about is the question is around saying to our superintendent, cut the budget, and then having the board say, well, we want smaller class sizes, so let's hire more teachers, or we need to do something about the math curriculum, so let's do a study or let's do a survey. And so that we're making policy decisions that impact or hinder her ability to work within the budgetary constraints that we've identified for her. And I think that there are some real concerns there. We have this deficit. We need to address it. We need to spend less money. I am a fan of looking at things more closely. And I'm also a fan of being honest with taxpayers that if, for example, class sizes, if we can't afford to have 16 kids in a class, if we have to have larger classes, we need to be honest with our taxpayers about what that's going to require as the school district grows. And that's just one example. So
thank you, candidate Talk-Ponder. Thank you. Candidate Behrend.
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful to follow Michele because we can double team on this. She's explained to you we have a structural deficit. 71% of our budget is made up of our personnel costs, which are negotiated 5-year contracts, thanks to Michele in part getting that because it's such a huge chunk. And it's going up at 3%, one of the best negotiated rates in the state. But a 2% budget cap, there's always going to be a deficit. That's where that comes from. If no other costs go up. Last year, everything else went up 8%, 12%, 16%. So we had a huge hit last year. We actually got money, $14 million over 5 years from Princeton University to help support the budget, which is how we try to keep things going. We find other sources of funds. We added that in and we were flat last year. I thought we would at least get another year or two. When I first joined the board, we were on fumes. We had used up all our reserves and we ended up doing a 3% cut in 2018. And we had kids in classrooms who lost AIS support. We lost things in classrooms facing children. We've got a new business administrator. He found savings. We've done all sorts of things to find savings. We've made it. COVID gave us a lot of money. The COVID money is gone. Now we're back at this place where we have to figure out how to move forward every year. And we do priority-based budgeting. We look forward 3 years. We try to figure it out. Where are we going to get the funds going forward? I think we've worked on making the buildings tight. We're working on energy efficiency. We're hoping to go to solar. We're hoping to find some money there. We're going to have to look for new sources of revenue. We're going to have to ask community partners, those who are not on the tax rolls necessarily, to make sure they're paying their share, although Princeton University has been very generous. It's a constant battle for us to make the finances work to be able to provide the programs we have. And we have to be thinking creatively how we most effectively utilize the people we have. And that mean larger class sizes, different ways of teaching in the high school. I don't know. We've got to be creative and innovative because the math really doesn't work in public education today in New Jersey. It's very tricky. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Behrend. The next question is directed to candidates Hubbard, Obergon, and Tuck Ponder. Are you, as a district leader, prepared to make budgetary decisions which will enhance the opportunities of children who will not go to 4- and 2-year colleges upon graduation? Specifically, what role do you believe vocational and job preparedness training should play in the education of our young adults in this district, which measures its success by what colleges our children attend? Are you prepared to make investments in students who succeed in those programs, like reducing the cost of books and tools? I'm going to start with candidate Hubbard.
Thank you. So the overwhelming majority of our students go to college. Only 7% of our graduates last year did not enroll in college, and presumably some of those were taking a gap year. This complicates the high school's ability to meet the needs of those who go straight to work. My mother-in-law taught for years at Queens Technical High School, where kids can major in cosmetology, electrical installation, and plumbing, among other things. Teaching those subjects takes up a lot of space. I would like to see, it would be great in theory if we had like an auto body, classroom at the high school, but already the school is bursting, and it's not clear that there's enough demand to support that kind of a class. I would love to see more hands-on education in our schools. I'd love to have our kids take shop and learn to cook healthy food and how to fix bikes. I think they could all benefit from that. But we're not ever going to have the full course offerings of a vocational high school. So how are we going to meet those kids' needs? The Mercer County Technical High Schools have become elite schools now that prepare kids for careers in healthcare and STEM. They're actually sort of more competitive than ordinary high schools, so they aren't really helping either. My sense is that to meet the needs of kids who don't want to go to college, we're going to need to have a combination of thinking about what we can offer where there is enough demand to make it sustainable. And I like the fact that the high school has a new course in gardening and Spanish. That seems pretty cool to me. But we're also going to have to build strong relationships with local community colleges, apprenticeship programs, and employers. With volunteer hours and internships, it's great to expose our non-college bound kids to possible lines of work. I used to be on the board of UNOW for 8 years, and we would always have teens from the high school come in the summer to work at UNOW. They got paid.
Hubbard, I apologize, you're out of time. Thank you. Thank you for an excellent response. Candidate Obergon.
Thank you. So again, I'm very much of the view, and I say this to my kids and anyone who's heard me talk out of this kind of sphere, that I don't believe everyone should go to college, to be quite honest with you. I think for many kids, it's an absolute waste of money and you're going to drown yourself in debt. That's a different topic. I do believe, I think Eleanor mentioned something that's quite interesting. And I remember the high school I went to, we had a wood shop, we had an auto shop, etc. We have to be very careful, because otherwise, by proposing those types of classes, and if we don't have the sufficient student body to fill them, we're going to have DLI times 4, right? We're going to have underutilized classes. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't address things, but ultimately, within the realm of what we can do, what we want to do is provide students with a strong minimum foundation. So at least, they have a strong pathway and guidance to choose other paths, right? So if there's a student who wants to be, a nurse's assistant, right? Well, we should have counselors who can sit there and say, listen, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to spend 80 grand a year. Actually, you can make a very good living doing this. We should be working with, construction firms around here who are looking for high school interns over the summer to sit there so they can sit there and think about a future in their role, which is going to be a different path. So again, there's an ideal way where if the money was no option, we would have a whole bunch of shops And I certainly would put even my kids who are going, I hope go to college, I would put them in those shops as well. But we have to be realistic with expenses and the reality.
Thank you, Candidate Obergon. Candidate Tuck Ponder.
Thank you so much. This is actually one of my favorite topics. We did have 93% of our students go to college. And in large part, it's because a lot of our students have no idea what their options are in the world. I'm, as a former staffer in the Princeton University Office of Career Services, I do know that because I talked to a lot of students who were at Princeton University who didn't really want to be there, and it wasn't the right place for them. So I am very committed to giving students options and informing them and educating them about all the wonderful careers they can do in life. So last year, Sasha Weinstein, who used to be the co-president of the high school PTO, and we had a conversation about that, and we went to Principal Schmiel and said, hey, can we have a career fair, but not tables in the gym? Can we have all the students in the high school all the students in the high school hear about different careers. So we invited like 70 people to come in, and we did a round robin where all the students got to hear about all kinds of different careers, from military and plumbing and lawyering and just kind of across the board, so that they know the world is bigger than trying to get into an Ivy League school. That there are things that they can do that are fun and interesting and fulfilling careers where they can be creative and they can communicate and they can collaborate and they can be critical thinkers and they can live a life of joy and purpose, which is what we say we're about. So dealing with the diversity and giving our kids opportunity is really important to me.
Thank you, Candidate Tuck Ponder. My next question is directed to candidates Bierman, Obergon, and Hubbard. If you join the board, given your apparent disapproval of the board and the district office, what will be your working relationship with them? Is it your intention to develop a working relationship, or do you intend to be adversarial and seek the dismissal or removal of district leadership? I would like to start with candidate Bierman, please.
Oh, I walk in with no presumptions. Look, I'm here to do a job and serve the whole community, and I want it to work efficiently. And so I don't care who's there. It's you have to, first of all, when you get into office, you have to fill out the political ecosystem. As an amateur anthropologist, the creeds and the mores of the political ecosystem. Secondly, I don't pull any emergency string when I first come in. That would be like being a diva. You have to figure out where your place is, where you can help the most, what committee you get put on, exactly, and stuff. And the third time too, just because I disapprove of how someone did something, I wouldn't do what she did to Frank Schimmel and like just go after her and something. To me, it was a little vindictive. I want to do what's right for the school, and I'll work with anybody, any place, anytime to do that. And to
She who I didn't follow.
Oh, I guess Carol Kelly and the administration.
I see.
And I'll work with anybody, any place, anytime to do what's right for the school. I make a holistic decision and go from there. To get rid of a superintendent would be highly disruptive, probably counterproductive. I don't know what her contract looks like. I don't know who we get, but let's say even if we did that, who would replace her? You have to make a holistic, objective decision that's good for the whole school.
Thank you for that, candidate Bierman. Candidate Obergon.
Can you just repeat the question, please?
Okay. If you join the board, given your apparent disapproval of the board and the district office, what will be your working relationship with them? Is it your intention to develop a working relationship, or do you intend to be adversarial and seek the dismissal or removal of district leadership?
Okay. So I have no intention to be adversarial. I would say my view is, and I wouldn't say that I disapprove of everything the board does. There are some things that I think they do well. There are some things that I think they don't do well. But obviously, in my opinion, I'm running because I think there are important things that are not being done well. So my view is to go in there, and it's the way I operate in my professional life is, we have to have a conversation. So let's, if I were to win, it's because people feel that, you know, the message that I have or any of the other candidates have is a message that they feel is not being heard. So I would like to bring that to the table and say, how do we, you know, incorporate that into the broader agenda? And also just more generally, I think sometimes a new person comes in with fresh ideas and comes at things with a different view. And perhaps maybe there are other people who have that same view and they just feel they haven't had enough support, so they may add that. It may be that conversely, I may have a view and it's not as simple as I think, and they sit there and say, Rene, this is why this can't be done. In those scenarios, I would like to think we should do a better job of communicating that to the community so they understand why things, you know, aren't being done that they think are very easy to be done. You know, because again, I think some people think there's a silver magic wand, you know, and I'm learning very quickly that I know that there's not a silver magic wand. So again, from my perspective, I do definitely want to be collaborative. I want to discuss all the facets of an issue, and then, you know, compromise where we have to compromise, but, you know, in the direction that the community wants to go.
Thank you, Candidate Obergon. Candidate Hubbard.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying that Dr. Kelly has actually done a lot of things that I approve of. For example, she squelched the California math framework style reforms a couple years ago. That was great. I am very appreciative of the hiring of Dr. Tu, who's a really great assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. I'm really glad that we have a new math supervisor now. That's also Dr. Kelly's work, I understand. And I like the goals that we have for the strategic plan. So I'm not planning to go on the board and create trouble. And more broadly, I have 3 young kids in our schools at Riverside and at the Princeton Middle School. So I have a good 10 years ahead of me of being personally invested in our public schools. If I'm elected to the board, my top priority will be making sure that our children receive rich and challenging educations. After the social and academic tolls of the pandemic, I know that they need that, and that they also need happy, welcoming schools, and that our disadvantaged kids need that most of all. As a mother of mixed race children, I understand that our district is diverse and that our schools need to work for everyone. So I don't want to join the board in order to make trouble, but to improve the quality of the educations that our kids get in the schools. And I am perfectly happy to work with whoever's there to work towards that goal as effectively as I can.
Thank you, Candidate Hubbard. The final question of the night, well, because we are short on time, is directed to Candidates Behrend and Candidate Ponder. Please tell us how the upcoming referendum for facilities supports the goals of equity and inclusion as policy priorities of the district.
Should I go first this time, Michele?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I'm actually happy to go first.
Go ahead.
And this question also hits me in an area where I've been very vocal about this. One of the things that I've always found unfortunate about our school district, and Rene mentioned it earlier, was about how our students who reside in public housing, whether it's Griggs Farm or Reading Circle, and I have a lot of knowledge about this because I sat on the public housing board. I was a commissioner for 6 years. The burden of diversity in our school district is borne on the backs of those students. Those students don't get to talk about walkability. They don't get to walk to school. Their parents don't have easy access to the school. They get on a bus every day. And this has been the design of the community because we all value diversity. But what we're not willing to do is to equalize the opportunity for all of our children to exercise diversity by being bused to another school in another part of town. And so one of the things that I am concerned about is that people that live in the Community Park District, which happens to be where I reside, if they're not interested in sending their kids to the GLI program, their children get bused or they drive their children to another school in another part of town. And my kids went to CP and had a wonderful, wonderful education there, great school. I'm not sure, in fact, I'm not sure that our plan will address diversity or equity for our Black and Brown students. In fact, I don't see how we would continue to achieve diversity across our schools if we allowed the students to go to school in their district where they got to walk there. So that's just the, that's just the truth in my perspective.
Thank you, Candidate Ponder. Candidate Behrend.
Can I just spin that a little bit, Michele? I think she was asking about the November referendum first. I appreciate your point about the longer term planning. So I'm just going to speak to the November because that's
Thank you, because I did answer the wrong question.
It's okay, but we all good intent. That's fine. I just wanted, that was good information anyway. Thank you for that. But on the November referendum, I'll just say that we are responsible as a district to provide welcoming and appropriate facilities for our children. And we need to be smart with our money. And so I can't advocate for this referendum. We just put it in front of the public. But I will say this is an opportunity for us to do routine. We finally have cleaned up all our buildings the last 6 years. We've done 2 different referenda. We've got roofs, we've got walls, everything's working well. Now we have ongoing maintenance things. And that we want to upgrade, for example, the high school cafeteria, which will allow all of our children, and particularly those who get free and reduced lunch, to get a lunch in time, because we have a cafeteria that's undersized for the facility at the high school. And so one of the proposals is at $1.6 million to reorganize the high school cafeteria to make it flow better, have different seating, maybe use it for some instructional space, fix the acoustics. It's just something we need to do to upgrade our buildings to keep them being most effective for students. So that's a very big equity move in my view. And safety and security is for all children, and getting Wi-Fi in the building at Johnson Park so that they can call emergency, because everyone knows Verizon doesn't work anymore in this town. That's another thing we're doing. And we're putting, we're fixing the playgrounds so they don't have water standing at the different schools. So I view I view it as a kind of a no-brainer housekeeping referendum that we're putting in front of the community to bring $5 million in state tax monies that we already paid back to Princeton to pay for the debt service on this. So it's good use of our money. And if we use our money well, we've spoken about our deficit, our structural deficit. We need to use every dollar to its maximum so that we get that in the classroom for the kids. And so if we can maintain our facilities in a smart way, it helps everyone, and we can put it where it's most needed.
Thank you, Candidate Behrend. I have one final question, and it's for you, Candidate Behrend. During the summer, the Board of Ed formed committees to select a new high school principal. Our officers want to know why no Black or Latino parents were included on the committees for this critical decision until we and our allies wrote letters to the board members, and why you failed to respond to Princeton Parents for Black Children's communication when they wrote you personally about this concern.
Well, that's a really good question. We get written to all the time, and it's sometimes hard to tell when we're being written to individually versus the board. And I will say that the board president speaks for us, and I was board president for 3 years and spent a lot of time answering the public because it was my job, and it's not anymore. But I do respond if I think I'm being asked personally. But I think our answer for the summer was we have a policy and a procedure on how we select candidates for jobs. And first of all, it's not the board's role. We hire a superintendent and they run the process. We are not allowed to administer the schools. We ensure that they're well run. But the process that we have as a district for selecting new positions involves different representatives within the school buildings, people within our different capacities in the district. And we often have the PTOC representatives because they represent all of the parents in the school. So we usually have someone from the CPAG organization, which is the special education children, but we do not have specific parents from every different interest group on those committees, or we would have Jewish parents, we would have Muslim parents, we would have Hispanic parents, we would have Asian parents. We can't have we already have very large interview. I've been in some of these as an observer for the board, and Michele was actually designated on this one. And the candidate will come in and they look around and they say, oh my gosh, there's 18 people in this room, or there's 12 people in this room. This is very unusual. And we say, well, we're Princeton, right? Everyone wants to be here. We can't have everyone there. We have to have a process, which we followed in this case. And I will stick to that. I think we did it the way that we always do it. And we have to have good governance. So thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Behrend. And thank you to all the candidates for answering the questions that I posed tonight. I see Candidate Bierman waving as in good night.
Saying, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Saying goodbye.
Okay, thank you. So thank you to everyone. Veronica, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Hello, thank you. And that concludes our forum. I would like to thank our candidates for their appearance and their responses. Thank you to Caroline for her expert moderation, my colleague, Myra, and our partners in this effort, Not in Our Town. And finally, thank you for joining us. And if you have not voted, please go. Have a good night, everyone.